Cool. Alrighty. So I thought I would make a bit of a start by having a bit of a chat about what I've been doing the past year or so, digging into display painting. So for anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Alexi. I've been painting Warhammer since I was a kid. Sorry, Cragzog, can't get it all right first go. Painting Warhammer as a kid through high school, took a long break and then got back into it about 6 years ago. Started working for Games Workshop as a store manager for about 5 years, from 2019 till early 2024. And then left that job and started trying to dig into display painting. So most of what I had done before then was all army painting. And I was always pretty interested in, trying to make my armies look good, but I was never really trying to push them super, super far. These are some models from my Ork and Lumineth armies that I painted while I was working at Games Workshop. Tried to do a pretty good job. I was fortunate enough to meet a friend who's a sort of big figure, I guess, in Australian miniature painting scene, named Carl Morgan, who really was quite encouraging to come along to my first painting competition at the Crimson Brush and enter standard in 2024. Are we in focus? Let's have a little look. Nope. There we go. Let's see if that works. He had come into the shop a couple times, seen some of the models, and said, hey, bring him along to the Crimson Brush. So I went in 2024 to enter some of these guys in standard. So this Orc I painted in 2022. Little Beastboss. I think this Scinari Cathallar I painted in 2022 as well, I think, which was a really fun one. There's a few good Lumineth painters out there. It was my first time trying this sort of sheer cloth on the face, and I really liked the idea of this sort of star pattern in the folds of the cloth. I'd seen Natalia Orich, who painted a display model kind of similar, I think, to this, and tried to replicate it a little bit. So I took along 6 models to Crimson Brush in 2024. There were these two. I also brought my version of the Lion, who's just here. I painted him in 2023. Lots of stippling on the armor. At the time, I thought this was sort of one of the best models I had painted. I never really aimed to paint him for like a competition or anything, but I just wanted him to look good. So lots of stippling on the armor, and I tried this like cross-hatching pattern on his cape. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. It's a little dusty. I haven't brought him out of the cabinet in a little while. There you go. So Seamus, just in answer to your question, I was trying to paint well, but I wasn't trying to paint for competitions or anything. I just wanted my armies to look good, but I was always sort of in this balance of, I still wanted to paint armies and play games, but I didn't want to just spend forever on a single model. This guy took me, I think, about 4 weeks. I was sort of like a half in, half out with display painting versus army painting. And this is probably about as far as I could take a model where I could still say, like, honestly, I'm still going to be able to get them done with a reasonable degree of time to play games with. So here was the third model I took to Crimson Brush. I've also got a big guy for the Lumineth army that I brought with me. See if I can get the whole thing on screen. My Spirit of the Mountain for the Lumineth army. So here's a big guy. This is another one where, like the Lion, it's sort of, I was leaning into, half in, half out with display painting versus army painting. I think he looks pretty cool. I had like this idea in mind with this whole Lumineth army that they were going to be like worshipping the moon, you know, Akelarre, the big sphinx thing that Teclis rides. Here we go. And so the idea with this was I had the idea for this basing to be all this red stone, because in my mind there was like a big Khorne army invasion that had gone in, and it had like corrupted a bunch of the temples and bleached all their stones this sort of bloody red color. And then I've tried to have this sort of like veins of red running through the rocks that I matched on the top here on these little stones, which I think was pretty cool. I wanted there to be like a nice theme to the army. But again, yeah, like, you know, I thought this is, again, good army painting is what I was looking for, rather than necessarily display painting. So that was the fourth one I took to Crimson Brush. And then I got another big guy to show you, which is this Kill Rig I painted the year before, in 2023. A big guy. Not quite the same rock recipe, Seamus. Here we go. Okay, thanks, Ellison. I'm glad it's working well. So this model almost killed me to paint. I painted it in 2022, and I have a whole orc army that matches this this sort of like light skin on the orcs. I've got about, I don't know, about 1,000 points. I've only played a game with them once though. So I wanted to do like a lot of these beast snagger guys in the army. Oh, so Ellison, it is a it's actually really, really simple, even though I'd like to think that it looks pretty good. So let's zoom in on the weird knob, whatever he's called. So it's a base coat of Xandri dust just through the airbrush, or you can use a regular brush. And then I did a Zenithal spray of a color called Typhon Ash, which is a Games Workshop airbrush paint, but it's very similar to Screaming Skull, if you just want to use a regular paint and thin it through the airbrush. And then it's just a bunch of washes of Seraphim Sepia. So it's only 3 layers. And again, yeah, the idea was to have a mix for the skin that looked decent, but not a lot of work into it. Just 2 layers through the airbrush and then washes. It took a few washes, so I would thin Seraphim Sepia with the Lamian medium and just do the washes in a few stages so that the muscles would have like some nice definition. But if you look closely, like there's no actual highlighting on the skin. This is literally, these lines are not painted on, they're just from the airbrush and nothing else. So yeah, the idea was, yeah, again, army painting, right? So try to do it simple. But this thing took me forever to paint. I think it was about 6 weeks of painting this and nothing else. And he was in a few sub-assemblies. I normally hate doing sub-assemblies, but I had the big squig. He was one piece. These guns on the top, they actually still can rotate around and come off. Were sub-assemblies each. And the knob on the top was another one. But yeah, it was incredibly annoying to do and really quite boring. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think it looks really good. But it's hard to do. I would like to do more of these kill rigs. One day I want to return and do some more. Maybe do like a more of a converted one. I have a bunch of them. I have, I think, 3 more. So eventually I'll have to paint them, maybe, if I can. But yeah. So these were 5 models I painted, these guys. So the Kill Rig, my big mountain cowboy, Beastboss, the lion, and the Scinari Cathallar. These were models I had just painted for my armies, and Kyle Morgan, who had come into my Games Workshop store and just seen them on display, had sort of encouraged me to bring them along. He was like, these are good, you know, they could do well in the standard competition. So I thought I'll give it a go. It had sort of coincided with when I had planned on leaving my job anyway. So it took some time off, went down to Canberra, But I figured before going to Canberra, I'll work on a model specific for the competition. So I thought I'd paint something in mind for it, and it is this Lumineth Lord on horse. So I'll move these guys out of the way. So in the sort of 4 weeks or so lead up to the Crimson Brush in 2024, I thought I would do this Vanari Lord Regent. So I came up with a little bit of background for her as well. She's got the same hair and skin tone as another model I painted for the Lumineth army. So I sort of had them as like sort of sisters in my little army lore. Let's get them a bit more in focus. There we go. So this was about 6 weeks of work, including maybe 2 or 3 weeks where I was doing nothing but painting. I had left my job and was in the run up to the competition. I think I can see like a good evolution of my painting in this model compared to the other Lumineth. I think I tried to make the white a bit more like, you know, not quite volumetrically painted, but a little bit more like in-depth shading. I hope you can kind of see that. And I sort of tried to put a lot of effort into this fur texture on the, I don't know what the creature that she's riding is called, to be totally honest. Big llama thing. And it's a bit of a conversion. So this is, I mean, really the only conversion is the face, which is from the Scinari Enlightener model from the Lumineth. But I switched out the head that's on the Vanari Lord Regent normally. Tried to give her some of these little celestial patterns like I have on some of the other characters. And then the red base, which matches the rest of the army. And so they were the 6 that I brought along to the first Crimson Brush. They all did pretty well. I was very happy with how everything went. So this model got a silver in standard at the first show I went to. Pretty much everything I brought managed to get something. It was either commended or a medal. My giant kill rig got a gold. This model and the lion and my Beastboss got silvers. And then the Scinari Cathallar got commended. And the big mountain cow got a bronze. And I was kind of like, I was half happy and half kind of disappointed in a way, because this model was the one that I painted specifically for the competition, but it didn't do as well as the kill rig. And so I kind of thought, oh, well, you know, I'm not quite up to the standard of like, you know, the top of standard. Which I guess is, you know, I can't be too unhappy about that because it was the first time I went to a competition. But it was a weird one. I was really happy with how it went, but it was just that one thing of like, this model I had painted 2 years before this one did better than the model I painted just for the competition. And I'm sure if a couple of you guys have gone to painting competitions, you know, sometimes the model you put the most effort into is not the one that does the best, and you kind of end up with a slightly weird feeling. But either way, I'm still very, very happy with the model. But I was very inspired by going to the Crimson Brush. You know, there were lots of really, really cool models. I had sort of only really skirted around the edges of display painting before then. I didn't really know many people who did display painting. I had met Kyle, who obviously did it, but I didn't really know him very well. And I knew that there was the Sydney Display Painters Guild meetings that went on, but I had never gone to any. So after going to the Crimson Brush, I thought, you know what, here's something I can do. Yes, Kyle does have an Instagram, Ellison. He's at the Kyle M on Instagram. I can bring it up for you. So he was one of the judges at Crimson Brush, actually. And he's got a big history of display painting in Australia. He's won a lot of Golden Demons when Golden Demons were still run here in Australia as well as other places. So if you want to have a look at some of his cool stuff, let me bring him up real quick. Let's see if I can work out all this crazy shit, on Twitch, and see if it can work. How's this? Let's see how we go. Hey, there we go. So this is a piece that Kyle painted that won Crimson Brush in 2023. which is a really cool piece. If you don't follow Kyle, you should definitely check him out. I'm sure half of the people watching this already know who he is. But a really cool model, and he's a good guy. He was very helpful to me getting into this, very encouraging, and I definitely wouldn't be anywhere near as good as I am now if he hadn't helped me along the way. Alrighty. So, there we go. Back to normal stream. So I picked up a couple models from some of the stalls that were there that were run by Jaddo and Jim, so Stonebeard Miniatures and Specmod Miniatures, and decided to give a crack at my first bust, which was this model here, Rigel, from Inu Kingdoms. So as you can kind of see, I painted her to be a larger scale version of her, basically, just in, you know, the casual attire instead of the war attire, basically. So really happy with this model, but some weird things. This was my first NMM Seamus, except for one model that I did. I did do NMM on a sword of an Inquisitor that I painted for work at Games Workshop. But this is my first NMM, like around the whole model. Now, if you're very familiar with this model at all, you'll know Will Brightly painted this model. So this model here, painted by Will Brightly, a great painter in England who had come to Australia to judge the Crimson Brush. And he was actually running a class on how to paint this model when he came here. Unfortunately, I did not get a chance to go to that that class. Yeah, so I mean, look, the thing was, it was good NMM. I think it was alright, but it really is just kind of copying Will's. I didn't really work out much on my own. I think it's pretty clear. Like, you can see some of the shapes. Like, if you look at Will's, like particularly here in this little spot in the crown, can you see my mouse pointer compared to this little spot here? I think they're pretty similar. This was like, it's a really weird shape to try and get the NMM going correctly, I guess. A few other spots like this little light highlight here on her breastplate. I think you can kind of see it's pretty clearly influenced by her. It was nice because even though I didn't really know about Will's class when he came here, there were tons of people in Australia painting this, and so they were all over Instagram. So Will's one, and then I also looked at Liam's one here pretty closely to try and sort of work out what I was doing. I think you can kind of see, like, in my opinion, what was good about this and what was bad. Like, when I look back on it, this sort of silvery parts here are very, like, uninformed. You know, I didn't really know what I was doing with them. I couldn't really decide if they were going to be metal or if they were going to be the same kind of, like, I don't know, whatever this armor material is. And so I think it ended up just looking quite muddled and doesn't look like either painted armor or silver. And so I didn't really love that. I thought the gold was good, and I was definitely happy with that. And I thought these gems were quite cool, and her hair's nice. But I don't really think she's, you know, that great. But I like it. I'm happy with it. It's got some nice touches. I did some little star patterns here to link her into the Lumineth Lord, but I don't think it reads super well. I think the shadows are maybe too purple, but I think her eyebrows and her eyes look pretty nice. Yeah, what do you guys reckon? Not too bad. I also think her face is very flat, so this little under cheek is nice, I guess, but her face is super flat. Doesn't have any sort of really clear highlights on it, I don't think. You know, especially you look at Liam's one here, like, look at these crazy cheekbones, they look awesome. And then if you look at Will's one here as well, same kind of thing. You've got really nice highlights on the chin and, you know, in these lines under her eyes and on her cheek. Sorry, Seamus, no more orcs. Actually, well, I got one to show you later on. But yeah, either way, I thought it was I was pretty happy with it as a sort of dip my toes into display painting and painting larger scale models, it was nice that it was like familiar material, and it was basically like repainting a model I had already painted for Crimson Brush, but a slightly bigger scale. So it was fun, and I'm happy with how it turned out. But looking back on it now, I can definitely see like, you know, where I would improve it. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this stream, I guess. Have a little bit of a talk through some of these to see what went wrong and show the progression, I guess. So that was the first display scale bust, whatever. And then I followed this up with another one from Neko Galaxy this time instead of Inu Kingdoms, but you know, they're basically kind of the same company, but not quite, I don't know. Which is Val-K from Neko Galaxy. I picked this one up also from Fer Miniatures Jim at Crimson Brush. So this one, I think, compared to the last one, there was a lot more NMM that I had to figure out on my own. There was not as much of a clear influence. There was a few different versions of this model I had open that I was trying to look at, but I wasn't just doing almost like a, you know, I think that Rigel was almost a one-to-one copy of Will and Liam's, to be totally honest. But this has lots of like weird little spots of NMM, right? Lots of trim, lots of weird little NMM bits. And the idea with this was I wanted to give it like a sort of vibe of she's gone for a fly, you know, she's got a jetpack, and she's maybe found a spot at the top of a mountain to go and look out on the valley below. And so that was what I was trying to get at with this helmet reflection. So I thought, you know, let's try and paint the environment as a reflection in the helmet. And I think it's kind of like a 50-50 whether it was successful. A lot of people seem to like it. I definitely can see spots where it can be better now. And I think the biggest problem with this model overall is the visor is cool, but I think her face doesn't look very good, especially like her eyebrows. They look kind of strange, I think. But the visor I think is really nice. It's got a few nice angles. I think here it starts to look a little off, but like here I think it kind of plays pretty well, you know, where the breastplate reflects onto the mirror. And then I realized after I finished this model, where her fingers reflect into the screen, I probably should have painted like a fingernail, like a purple fingernail, so that you could see where it looks like, you know, her fingernails have disappeared in the skin of her fingers. But I still think it's pretty cool. I tried to look at like a lot of skiers with snow goggles, and it's really hard to find references of like weirdly specific stuff sometimes. A lot of gold goggles and ski goggles and stuff that were just ads, and so the reflection was photoshopped, so it wasn't really helpful. But yeah, Batch Painter, thank you. It definitely, I think it's good, but it's as you say, like, you know, a year on, I think it doesn't look that good, and so all I can see are like the problems. But to be honest, I'm really happy with her armor, like her breastplate, her arm, some of the jetpack. I think her hair could be better. I think in retrospect it looks a bit too platinum, you know, like dyed. It doesn't look supernatural. So Sean, compared to the first one, what do you guys think? I mean, I think they're kind of similar, to be totally honest. In some ways it was a step forward, and in other ways it was a step backwards. I think that Rigel's face, the shadow on her chin is deeper, and so there's a little more contrast there. And I took these two to a competition in Melbourne, Ark, which was the first competition I went to with any display miniatures. I weren't just gaming ones, and Rigel got a bronze medal and Val-K got a commendation. So I guess, you know, it was worse according to the judges. I do think it's probably, yeah, as you say, Seamus, it's kind of like they have the same problem, which is I think you can kind of see someone who's painted Warhammer faces but not large scale faces. you know, the kind of things that you have to do for these larger scale faces, and like the kind of nuances or whatever that you want to have to put into them. You know, I wasn't really used to that yet, and so all I had really done was Warhammer stuff. And you can kind of see, like, you know, from this part here in her forehead all the way down is exactly the same value in light. There's just a little bit of pink on her cheek, which, you know, is a bit flat. And then into the shadow side, like, I think this shadow here could be much darker and could probably be a little more interesting of a color compared to just a dark skin tone. Yeah, I think, like, in my experience now, like a year on, I feel like this is what you'll see when a lot of gaming scale miniature painters go try and paint a large scale model. They'll end up with a face a bit like this, where very flat, not a lot of nuance. But I mean, I think it's still fine. Like, I don't think it's bad, but it's not great, I guess. But the stuff I really liked on this model is I really like the color composition. I like the color scheme, I should say. I don't know about the composition of the color, but I think the scheme's cool. I think her hair, even though the hair is such a huge part of it, I think there's parts of it that are nice and parts of it that are probably needed more work. It was kind of fun to paint. It's very sculpted and chunky. It looks a bit anime. But yeah, not too bad. So I really enjoyed painting both of these. The larger scale, well, they're the same scale, but this is a full bust versus an academic bust. Thank you for the subscription, EIJ Star. Appreciate it. Definitely took a lot longer to paint Val-K, but I really enjoyed them both. I got pretty hooked, and so continued to do it. Oh, is it? Sorry. Hey Joe, how you doing? Alrighty, so those two down. So then I painted another Warhammer model. And so these were all to do for the ARC competition in Melbourne. So I cracked out Belial and painted him up. And I wanted to paint another Dark Angel, obviously. I've got a Dark Angel army. And I think even now I'm still doing display painting. I'm wanting to do display painting stuff, but I couldn't bring myself not to paint a Warhammer model on a gaming base. So I figured, you know, I can still use him if I play a game. But I think if you compare his armor to my armor of the lion, you can kind of see he's a lot better, I think. What do we reckon? Very similar color scheme. My idea for the Dark Angels, even though they're just regular Dark Angels, was that I wanted all the inner circle guys to be in this kind of like greenish blackish armor, even though Belial, you know, he's supposed to be just a Terminator, so he should be in bone colored armor. But I wanted to do something a little different, so he didn't just look the same as a squad of Terminators if he's leading the Terminators. No drilling of the gun barrels. I just painted little black circles on there because I'm a cool guy. You know, drilling the gun barrels is overrated. So same kind of cross hatching that I did on the cape of the lion, but I like to think I took it a little further with this one. So here he's on the back. He's probably a little satin. I should have probably matted it a bit, but it looks nice. End of last year, so I would be tempted by that inner circle box, Ellison, except I already had bought literally every single model in that box, so I didn't need any more. The Dark Angels came out just as I was leaving Games Workshop, so I still had that staff discount to buy a bunch of them. So I stocked up. Thank you for the gift of the sub. Oh, so that's my mum, for anyone in the chat. So I made more of a stab into sort of like volumetric armor painting. What I did with this one was I took a photo of him after I had primed him in Chaos Black, and then had that photo up, like lit the photo based on where I wanted the light to be coming from, and tried to use that as my reference to paint him in all the right spots. And so I think, you know, he's got a pretty nice like lighting scheme. The base is pretty simple, I think. As you can kind of see, it's mostly just dry brushed with a bunch of pigment slapped on. I'm quite happy with the skeleton man. I think he looks pretty cool. What do we reckon? And I'm also pretty happy with the text on there. It's kind of hard to see. Lots of little text. Yes, he was pretty cool. So these were the models I took to Ark. This guy got a bronze. I took her again with me as well, and then the 2 busts. So I took 4 models. Yeah, batch painter, exactly. Feels like display painting rather than army painting, right? This is kind of more on the side, I think, of the display painting than just the army painting. Even though I still have him on the gaming base. So I took these 4 models to Ark. I got 3 bronzes and a commendation. I was really pleased with that because Ark has no split between standard and masters. So we had all the legends in masters like Dave Colwell and Liam. Thanks for the gifted subs, Inferno. What a legend. So yeah, really happy. These guys did all right. Didn't expect to get anything there because no split between standard and masters, but they did okay. And I was getting pretty hooked by then. You know, I had good results at 2 competitions, and I thought when I got back from Melbourne, I'll try and dig in a little deeper, paint some busts with a little more thought behind them, and I will show you those very soon. Thanks to people who are subscribing. That's really nice. Hopefully you're enjoying me rant for a long time. Alrighty. So, finished up Belial. I think he's pretty cool. And in the, I should say also, on some of these models, especially this Rigel, I had been going to the Sydney Display Painters Guild meetups. And if you're not familiar with them, if you're in Sydney, if you're in Australia in general, we have guilds, little painting clubs basically, that meet up in every major capital city, I think except for the Northern Territory, unfortunately, in Australia, and it's full of a bunch of cool painter guys. You should definitely check him out. If you're in Sydney and want to learn how to be a painter, you should come along. Thomas, I have been painting, I mentioned at the start of the stream, I started painting when I was a teenager, and painted through high school, and then stopped painting through all of university and restarted when 8th edition 40k came out, which I think, if I'm remembering right, was in 2018. And I've been digging in ever since. Hey JC, thanks for coming. How you doing? I'm just plugging the guild right now. So one of the things that was super helpful was coming to the guild meets. At my first guild meet, I just randomly happened to sit next to Liam, which was really cool. He had a lot of really sick models. And Kyle and Steve spent a long time giving me some feedback on this, which was really, really nice. And helped me immensely. So bear that in mind in the background of all of this. I'm going to the guild meetups, and that's where I bring in this guy. So the Sydney Display Painters Guild ran a event called Dogma 48. So basically we sit in a room for 2 days and try and paint something in 48 hours. And this was what I did for it. Dogma 48, I think JC can probably tell us, was something started in, Denmark? Somewhere in Europe. And yeah, the idea is to get in a big room with everyone, all your painting buddies, your painting locals, and you got 48 hours to try and complete something. And they ran this, I think, not long after Ark. And this Dogma event was a real turning point for me. in my painting. I don't necessarily think this project is super well painted, but I think it's pretty cool. But also just being in the room with all the amazing artists. JC was there, Joe was also there. Really just made me want to do this a lot. Made me want to paint a lot. So I decided, I had this idea to paint this crab. So this crab is from the Age of Sigmar Warhammer Underworlds warband, the Idril Deepkin one that I can't remember the name of. And I thought that is a big crab, and I wanted to make it fighting an Adeptus Titanicus model, because there's nothing that scales the crab, you know, as a 32mm Age of Sigmar model. So I thought if I just placed him next to some 8mm models, he would look like a giant crab. So that is the idea of this big giant, like kaiju crab, attacking some space marines. So this is the first kind of quasi diorama I had made. I had sort of mocked it up on paper before going to Dogma and built some of it. And I can definitely see some of the issues with the composition of the model. It's got a big tower, but I think it's pretty cool. It's just a cool thing. Square plinth. The biggest annoyance with it is, I don't know if you guys can tell this super easily, but this cut here is wonky. It was really hard to try and get straight. You can kind of see how it juts out. Oh, shocker. Absolute garbage. But it still looks alright, I think. What I had tried to do was make the composition so that when you square off the plinth, you're looking at the knight on one side, straight down the barrel. Yeah, exactly, Joe. We just get to ignore that, don't we? Let me zoom in a bit. So when we're looking down the barrel, we get the Imperial Knight on one side, and then down the barrel we get the crab's face on the other side. What do we reckon? Pretty good. And then from here you also get like the crab's claw sort of with a nice angle above that dreadnought, which is pretty cool. We've got a little Easter egg 48 here on the, I don't know, whatever these things are called, roadblocky whatevers, which was given to me by Kyle at the event, a little brass etch. And then just a bunch of random Space Marines put out. The biggest issue, I think, with the composition is, even though those two squared off angles are cool, it doesn't have one angle where you can see everything. You kind of have to hold it a bit like this to be able to clearly see every model, and then you see every model, but you don't get a good look at any model. So I think the composition, well, after I finished this, I definitely looked back on it and thought that composition was cool, but it could be a lot better. So something to bear in mind for future projects where I had to make a base, because I'd been mostly painting obviously Warhammer models and a couple of busts. I'd never had to sort of compose a scene before. But Dogma was really fun. One of the best parts of it was just, I had, by pure coincidence, sat next to Jordan, who's at Lead White on Instagram. Now, I'm sure everyone here knows who Jordan is, but if you don't, he is a very good painter. I'll bring up his little profile here for us. I'm sure you will have seen some of these models. Some really amazing stuff. He's a traditional artist who's dug into some miniatures. So he sat next to me doing some Dogma work while we were there. He did this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try and open it properly. Here we go. This like Hieronymus Bosch scene at Dogma was his contribution. Famously unattractive, exactly, Seamus. But we sort of got to talking, and after that messaging a bit, and he helped me learn a hell of a lot about painting over the next few months. So yeah, Dogma, a real turning point for me on wanting to be good at painting, basically. Alrighty, so all done. Dogma crab, pretty good. I really like the idea of putting some of these Imperialis, Warhammer Imperialis, Legions Imperialis, and Adeptus Titanicus models in scenes with like some monsters from Age of Sigmar. So I've got a couple other ones planned as follow-ups to this, which I will do at some stage in the future, I think, because they're cool. They're cool. I think I want to do one with the octopus that comes in the Warhammer Age of Sigmar warband from Deepkin as well. That'll be fun. We'll see how we go. Definitely a future project. So the next thing I painted was this academic bust of a dwarf from Hera. So this is Fer Miniatures. Very, very cool company. Lots of awesome models. And he's just a little guy. So basically I thought after Dogma, if I want to really dig into display painting, I got to learn what the hell I am doing. So I basically decided to do a series of 3 academic busts. Here was the first one, where I would try and focus on some new element of painting in each one. And is this guy coming up nice and clear for you guys? Let me know if he's not. So a few first things with this, or first times with this. First time doing a secondary lighting effect. Hey, look at that. We got a nice blue shadow. So wanted to pay much more attention to lighting. It helped that he is a male dwarf, not to stereotype, but female faces tend to be, I think, harder to paint than male faces. Not always, but I think they tend to be harder to paint because they tend to be very subtle. And once you lose the subtlety, they can look a bit funky. It's hard to tell from the beard, right? So, very craggy, very deep set face, lots of purple shadows. As you can see, the idea was to have the light coming from this direction. So I tried to be pretty accurate with my lighting placements. So we can kind of see everything that's in light from this angle. And then when we turn him, we get our shadow side. And the blue light is coming in the shadow side. So critique for him now is a few things. I think the metal looks pretty nice, but I think it's still kind of, I would call it like a little basic NMM, and I don't really know if I've necessarily gotten that much better at NMM between painting this and now. I think maybe a little bit better, but I haven't done a huge amount of it. The biggest sort of annoyance I have with this guy is I think his hair doesn't look that good, both in his beard and in his cape, his furry cape. I particularly also don't like this bit of skin, so he's not supposed to be wearing a shirt in the box art version. I should bring up as well, just talking about references. So the first bust, Rigel, I painted based on Will's and Liam's versions. This one I painted leaning very heavily into the box art that was painted by Danny Giles Seraphon. I think his name's Daniel Gonzalez. I'm not 100% sure. Come on, let's get back in focus, guys. Where are we? Sorry. Oh, there we go. Hello, people who have raided the chat. Vulgar display of gaming. I'm just basically chatting, doing a little review of my display painting models that I painted over the past year. Going well. Thanks for coming. Thank you. So yeah, basically I was looking at Daniel's version here. Hopefully that's his name. I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, Daniel Gonzalez. Really, really nice version. You can kind of see, I think, the influence in the way I've done the gems. Can you guys see where my cursor is? Yeah. So very big influence there, the green. I tried to make mine more turquoise than just green. And I really like this sort of purple shadow I've got going here. I think that's really nice. I think the silver or steel NMM is pretty basic. and definitely something that can be improved. Same with the chest. I mean, you look at Daniel's one, it's really amazing painting. Let's get that close-up going. NMM looks much more real, much more contrast in it, a lot of blingy lights, and this face is much more alive. Mine almost looks, I think, a bit like an undead dwarf, you know, like he hasn't seen much sunlight. His skin's very pale. I think we might be a touch overexposed, so I'm just going to turn us down a level of darkness. There we go. His hair's much better in Daniel's version. But I think it was a nice attempt. Thomas, who are my biggest inspirations? So there's a lot, to be totally honest. I think in terms of, if I were to just name a few, in Australia, probably my two biggest inspirations would be Dave Colwell and Jordan Richardson. Both kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. So Jordan was Lead White, who I was mentioning before, if we want to have a look at his stuff. Very rough, well, not rough, but very expressive painting. This Tywin model might be something you might have seen floating around. An amazing miniature painting, very different to normal style. Obviously, Joe and Seamus, big inspirations as well. But we got Jordan's very, very expressive, very different style of painting. And then we got someone like Dave Colwell, who is just a master of making things look very, very neat and tidy and awesome. Amazing lighting. So they're probably two of the painters who I get inspired by the most, both from Australia. But if we're talking worldwide, I mean, Jesus, there's too many to mention. Mark Masclans, Arnau Lazaro, Albert Font, heaps of people. Anyway, back to what I'm talking about, which is our dwarf. So the idea with him was to learn a little bit about this two-tone lighting, and I think it was pretty successful. I also had this warm shadow around the end, which was actually a piece of feedback that Jordan gave me on the model as I was painting it, and I think it kind of tied in this fur coat cape to his beard a little more and ended up pretty nice. But I still think there's maybe a bit more work that could be done. I learned a lot with him. People seem to like this model a lot. When I took him to the Crimson Brush at the start of this year, a few weeks ago, he got a silver medal. He was the best performer besides my two most recent models, which I'll show you later on. But yeah, I think he's pretty cool. So I followed him up with another academic bust. And again, the idea was do 3 academics where I'm trying to learn something new in each one. So with him, it was kind of the two-tone lighting, but it was also male face. First big-scale male face I'd painted. So followed him up with Idril Wisdom Star. So another academic bust, this one from Bigchild Creatives. Very nice. It's a smaller scale. I think this is 1/16, something like that. You look at her next to Rigel, you can see much smaller. Got a lot of inspiration on this from Arnau Lazaro's amazing version. His is a real masterpiece, I think. Really muted palette. This sheer cloth looks amazing. But to be honest, I didn't get a huge amount of one-to-one painting inspiration for him, but I just like looking at his. So really cool, really cool, beautiful version of the model. Obviously, his version is the full bust. Mine is the academic bust, no arms. Thanks, Seamus, for linking those accounts. I'm sure, to be honest, people already follow most of them. Alrighty. I'm also just noticing there's a little bit of a delay between my stream and the chat, so if it takes me a while to respond to anyone, my apologies. So this one I found very difficult to paint. A few things I was trying to do for the first time is the cast shadows. So we can kind of see the lights coming from here. And I tried to put quite a bit of effort into lining up these cast shadows as we turn the model. So we can kind of see cast shadow from her nose and from her hair. goes down this like cowl onto her breast. I think it worked out alright. Like, as you can kind of see, it's not perfectly lined up. You can still see a bit of a nose, a bit of a, cheek that should be in shadow when we get it looking at it from the light source. But I still think we turned out alright. I'm not too sure. You guys can tell me whether you think the cast shadow is particularly convincing. It's okay, I think. This was a huge pain. I should say the Dwarf took me about 7 or 8 painting sessions to complete. And bear in mind, while I'm painting these, I am unemployed. So a painting session is like 8 hours. I'm spending basically the whole day painting. So 7 sessions on the Dwarf. This took a lot longer. Probably twice as many painting sessions. If you ever speak to my partner Claire about this model, there were a bunch of times where I just had her standing up in a dark room holding 2 different colored lights shining into her face, which I don't know how helpful it was, to be totally honest, but we got to do what we got to do for miniature painting, guys. So I'm quite happy with a few things about this. I like her hair. It's very golden, a very warm gold. I basically used the same colors. Exactly, Glamorous Life of a Model Clary. And yeah, Batch Painter, it varies. On this model, I definitely had a few sessions that were shorter. But I also had some very long ones. And this model, I tend to take photos of work in progress as I'm going on the model. And this, I have more work in progress photos of this than even some of my best miniatures. Because I just had to keep taking photos to try and work out what I was doing. A few things that I think, if I'm critiquing the piece now, about 6 to 8 months later, I think about 8 months later, maybe 9 months later, she does have better things to be doing than holding up the lights. But, we must suffer for the art. Exactly, Ellison. Is one, I think she's on the plinth at the wrong angle, right? So this is something that was I was starting to get drilled into me by my betters in the miniature painting world, is that when you have a model that you put on a plinth, you need to be more thoughtful than just whacking it on whatever. I basically put it on this square plinth that I bought from Dragonfly Relics. If someone can, please link Dragonfly Relics in the chat. That's a store from Siona, who's an Australian miniature painter in Brisbane who does a lot of plinths. One of the few resin plinth suppliers in Australia that we can actually buy some of these things from. I think Dave Colwell might have planned the design for this plinth. I'm not 100% sure, but she's a gun. She's made a lot of plinths. Obviously the one for the Dwarf as well, as you can tell, but I had to cut a little bit off. Everyone please support Claire. She is indeed a model. So the problem with it is she's squared up on the plinth, but that is not the best viewing angle of the model. Best viewing angle of the model, I think, is probably here. Maybe here. And so ideally, that would be the angle of the model when we're looking at the plinth squared up, right? Where instead, this is the angle, and so it is not, in my opinion, very ideal. It's nice because we get a bit of that blue light, but it's still not the best viewing angle of the model. And when it's on a square plinth, you kind of have to do a bit more work to find your golden angle than when it's on a circular plinth. Small thing, but if you're trying to dig into display painting, definitely consider how you glue it on the plinth. So with this model, I glued it on the plinth before I painted it, which was a mistake. Nowadays, I don't glue them onto the plinths until they're finished, and so I can work out the best angle to glue them on. I think her light side looks nice. One of the biggest things that I think kind of went wrong in this is a few things went wrong with her face. So if you actually look at this sculpt, so it's called Idril Wisdom Star from Bigchild Creatives. If you look at the sculpt with no paint on it, her face looks a lot like the sculptor used Charlize Theron as a model for the sculpt. I don't know if they did definitely, but it looks a lot like her. And when a sculpt has a likeness of a person, it's very, very easy to lose that likeness. And I thought, when I'm painting this, you know what, I'm going to try and see if I can keep that likeness. Jordan Richardson, Lead White, he's someone who keeps the likeness of a person amazingly well. I don't think there's anyone I could point to that does a better job of it. Like if we went back to his Tywin Lannister here, like this is a very expressive painting. It's not super, within the lines and stuff, but you can't tell me you've ever seen someone paint a miniature that looks more like Charles Dance than this. And that's not an easy thing to do. This is a model of, Charlize Theron, where the sculpt looks exactly like her. But the model, after I have painted it, looks nothing like her. So I think I lost that likeness. That's not something you have to do. A model, he just sticks a photo on a bust. Exactly, JC. He's a champ. I don't know how he does it, but he does it. I think I lost the likeness, which was unfortunate. I think it's a hard skill to master. Some other stuff I like about this is I kind of like the silver NMM. Some of the critique I got when I took this to some shows is that the NMM is not kind of bright enough. Her hair kind of overpowers the silver. So her hair looks much more gold than the silver does. Can he paint feet? That's a good question. You'll have to ask him. Has he painted a full figure with feet? I don't know. I think he's painted a mermaid, but it's a cop-out, no feet. So yeah, her cowl looks nice. You can see it's a little scratchy, but I think it looks cool. Either way, this model was very difficult, and I did not enjoy painting it very much. And I think also one of the things that made me dislike it was this secondary light. I think it's kind of unmotivated. I don't really know why I did it, beyond that I did it on the Dwarf, and I thought, why not do another light again? And all three of these academic busts have two light sources on them. You'll see the next one in a second. But with her, it kind of made the least sense to me. You can kind of see like there are spots which would probably be getting some of the blue light, like here, maybe down here, where it kind of stops at weird spots. There are some pieces I think look really nice, like this blue reflection here in the NMM, some of the gold from her hair. Like it kind of works, but I think overall, there's a lot on this that I think didn't quite work out. So yeah. Well, Batch Painter, I'll put a pin in, do I prefer busts as a display over full models regardless of scale, because I have only painted right now to date one full figure, which I'll show you a bit later if we end up with time, which hopefully we will. And I like them both, and they're both different for different reasons. I think I need to paint more full figures to make a really informed decision on what I like the most, to be totally honest. The full figure is probably in some ways the best model I've painted, and I'll bring it up soon. But I do really enjoy busts. Oh, okay, well, in terms of Warhammer, nowadays I like painting the larger scale stuff much more. So whether it's a bust or like a 75mm figure, I just like the display stuff more. I think it's going to take a lot to get me back to Warhammer now. I've dived too deep into display painting. I definitely want to do more Warhammer still, because I'd like to go to Golden Demon one day, and try and compete there. That's something I'm hoping to do, maybe next year, maybe the year after. But the army painting sort of bug has been completely smashed out of me by display painting nowadays. So we'll move on from her, and I'll show you the third of the three academics. So we can leave these two guys in the background. So King Arthur, also from Bigchild Creatives. I will paint a 32mm for Ark, Seamus, at least one. Don't worry too much. So King Arthur, also from Bigchild Creatives, an academic bust. There's a few versions of this going around that are quite nice. I always like to see and do some research and try and look at different painters' versions of the model that I'm going to paint before I make a start on it, just to get some ideas. And everyone tries to make him look like this, heroic figure. And I thought I'll try and reinterpret him and make him look like a mad king. So if we kind of get a little look into his crazy eyes, let's see if we can get him in focus. Whoa. My idea with him is that he's looking at a burning kingdom that either he's sort of done himself, he's caused, or maybe it's his kingdom that's burning from a invading army, or maybe it's something he's done. Who knows? And so I tried to give him these sort of crazed eyes looking into the fire, like he's sort of, beholding what he has wrought in the world. Obviously, lots of fire on his steel breastplate. Sorry, I'm going to try and down the brightness a tiny bit, because I think this model looks better in the darkness. There we go. How are we looking? All right? Let's see. There we go. So this is the most complicated non-metallic metal model I have painted. By a long way, obviously. The idea was obviously to have our flames coming from the front and moonlight coming in from behind him. So, nighttime scene, he's quite dark, the flames are illuminating him. What do we reckon? Pretty cool. I got a lot of help on this one from some of my painting friends, Jordan and Kyle in particular. Let's see, sorry about the camera wobbliness. There we go. To try and get this NMM right. There's parts of it I really, really like. Funnily enough, I think in particular his gigantic codpiece is one of the sort of strongest parts of the model. We love to see it, don't we? Some of the critique that I've gotten on this model since I painted it is that because the value of the light in this is so high, it's distracting. So Peapot 39, do I use a light source to pick out volumes, or can you see them as is? I definitely use a light source. I find it very difficult to see them on the model. When I look at painters who just start painting away and find the values on a model, I am always in awe of how they're able to do it. If you watch someone like Eric Swinson or Mark Masclans, two obviously masters in display painting, and they can just look at a sculpt and kind of, work out where the lights are going. Their skill is something that I can only aspire to try and replicate one day. And yeah, Seamus is right. I do basically take a ton of photos to use as reference beforehand. One day I'll try and work out a way to show some of the reference photos on the stream. The most I could do is my Be Right Back screen and stream starting soon screen. That was good. But I can't get my reference photos up just yet. But I'll do that one day. But basically with this guy, I primed the model in black, and I have these two little LED panels that I bought from Amazon. I'll try and grab them now. These things. So basically they are little lights. Turn them on. There we go. They change colors. And I set them up on little tripods, and I light the model, and I take a photo on my nice camera, this one that you can see here, and then I have that up in front of me the whole time I'm painting, so that I don't really have to guess where the volumes are going to be. I can use my reference photo. Now, obviously, it's a miniature that we are painting, hopefully, with a bit of expression and artistry, or whatever you want to call it. So we got to do some interpretation. We can't just paint it exactly as the light would fall. Funnily enough, that's a critique I've had on this model, which in some ways I agree with and in some ways I don't, but I think this model is lit well, it's hard to say it's lit realistically because it's ridiculous, right? It's got this gigantic flame on his silver. It wouldn't look like this in real life, obviously. But the bottom of the model is lighter than the top of the model, where his face is. And that means that, if you're looking at the volumes and the brightest volumes, you're kind of looking down away from his face toward his codpiece, instead of looking up. And so, it could be better that way, maybe. But one of the things I kind of was aiming for was to have his face very shadowed. So, I'm not sure. I'm not saying the people who've given me that critique are wrong. They're definitely correct that it makes the piece probably more readable if I were to maybe up the values in his face. But I always worried, I always worried that if I made the value in his face too high, I would lose the effect of it being kind of shadowed and lit only by the fire. But it's a fantasy model, so you got to do some interpretation. It's something I've tried to bear in mind. This, I think, up until this point, so I painted this in the run-up to the Guilds in Painting competition, which was run in July by the Sydney Display Painters Guild. I should say this entire time I'm in the run-up to that competition, I'm sort of on the fence about whether I'm going to enter into the Standard or Masters competition. And these three busts, when I painted them, I kind of decided it's got to be Masters rather than Standard, because that's where I want to aim for. That's where I want to be. I want to be judged with the Masters guys, so I may as well jump in. I was a bit unsure, but going to some of the meetups, showing some of the people who are much better painters than me these models, and having them tell me, don't enter Standard was a nice confidence boost. But one of the things I had sort of constantly in my mind was that Lumineth model that I painted for Crimson Brush didn't get a gold in Standard, and I kind of had it in my mind that if you want to enter Masters in a painting competition, you got to get a gold in Standard first. I've since changed my mind about that. I now think, if you want to paint in Masters, you want to get really good at display painting, then just jump in. You may as well start getting judged harsher sooner rather than later. Unless, look, you don't have to, but for some people, you definitely want the confidence boost of doing well in Standard. But for me, I figured enter in Masters and let the chips fall where they may. So I definitely thought this was the best model up to date. I should say between these three that I painted, so the three academics, if we have a look at them all, they they go in ascending order. Oh, they're out of focus again. Look at that. This is what we call professional video guy. So yeah, go from little to big. Exactly, Sean. We love the moose. So we got our three guys. These were painted between April, or sort of April, May, and June, basically. And then Guilds In was in July. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong about the dates of Guilds In. I think it was in July. And I had one more model I wanted to do. But in between painting this and painting my next model, I was able to organize my first bit of painting tuition, which was in a private workshop with Jordan, Lead White, where we learned about painting faces, and we worked on, here's a work in progress model for you guys that never got finished, this bust of Conan, of Arnie. And he tried to teach me some of his face painting master skills. And as I mentioned before, Jordan really is a master of painting faces. Let's bring up, some awesome models of his again. A newly done one, our King of Thule. This is a beautiful face. And I thought, if he's willing to teach me how, well, he can't teach me how to do this. This is it takes a lifetime. But here we go. This is his version. I think you can see a bit of a difference between the two. But if I were to point out another real pivotal sort of turning point in my painting time, it was doing this this private workshop with Jordan where he came to my place and I got to pay him to teach me how to paint for a bit. I had been sort of grasping at face painting with some of my models, but you can kind of see, also you can see the scale difference between these two. Look how freaking massive Arnie is. He's a big boy. But Jordan was able to crystallize a lot of things, and it was an amazing experience. Very, 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 very helpful. I think on this model, like, there's some interesting little values I was able to get in. I mean, bear in mind this was painted in one day. I think I might have gone back to it once to try and work out what I was doing afterwards. And here's another little thing, just talking about likeness in miniatures. Like, mine looks nothing like Arnie. I think Jordan's one does look a lot more like him than mine does. Like this, look at, Arnie's a big bronze boy. He's always oiled up. Mine looks a bit too wrong. I'd like to go back to this model one day. I've never stripped a model before, and he might be the first model I strip. I mean, he's already naked. He doesn't really need stripping. But no, he might be the first model that I strip the paint off and try and redo using what I have learned since. But that was the first time I got to take a class with someone, and it was super helpful. One of the difficulties being in Australia is we're so far away from all the painters. We have some great painters in Australia, Jordan, Dave Colwell, we got JC, we got Andy Bucks, we got Nat, we got Liam, we got loads of people, but we don't have a huge amount of workshops and stuff. Like, I look at America, I feel like they're running 85 million workshops every weekend. Same in Europe. So very helpful. After painting Conan, I had one more model I wanted to paint for the guilds in, and I had 2 weeks to do it in, and so I wanted to do this diorama of a Sister of Battle. Let's zoom out a little bit. Here we go. So this is an idea I've had for a long time, ever since I saw this bust. So this bust is from Inu Kingdoms. Great fantasy miniature manufacturer from Poland. Same guys who made Rigel. And when I first saw this model, the box art painted by the legendary Dave Colwell, I thought, this is a Sister of Battle model. It's not a Sister of Battle, obviously, it's not a Games Workshop model, but it looks so much like a Sister of Battle model, right? Like, I think they very clearly were influenced by her, but some of the difficulties were exactly, Seamus, this is when we became friends. And yeah, Thomas, lead whites do look like 2D oil paintings more than miniatures. He is an oil painter. So he's a traditional artist who is a portrait painter. That's his background. He has been painting regular old canvas paintings for 20 years or something, and miniature painting is like his side hustle that he just does for fun, but his real art practice is in oil portraits. So definitely looks a lot like them, because that is the kind of artist that they come from. So with this, I saw Dave Colwell's absolutely gorgeous version of this bust called, I can't remember what she's called, Isra, I think her name is. And I thought, I got to do her as a Sister of Battle. And I kind of had this idea for a long time, maybe a couple years, where I would have her in this some kind of scene where I wanted to use some Sister of Battle models, and have her like in the background, like she's praying over them or something. And so the idea, eventually I decided, Guild's in, perfect time to try and do it. Thank you, Thomas. Yeah, that was essentially the idea, right? Was to try and have this dying Sister of Battle. So this model comes from the apothecary, what's she called? I can't remember the name. Whatever the Sister of Battle apothecary is called, the healer lady. Hospitaller, that's it. And she's got like this dying sister at her base, and she's like holding up a book. And so I just took that from that base and put her on this plinth and the platform. and had her sort of looking up into the face of this sort of apparition. And I'm really happy with, there's this one nice angle, I'll try and get it for you guys. When you get over the shoulder, you get her eyes sort of looking straight in. Let's try and get her in focus, there we go. Straight in, up at the bust, which I was really happy about. I do kind of like the composition. I think there's probably a lot that could be improved about it, and there's a lot of feedback I got when I took it to Guilds in the competition, and plenty that can be improved on for next time. But I think the story reads, it reads quite nicely. I've got a nice little Easter egg down the back, this little shrine with a rose and some candles, you can see. Tried to do a little color shift on the back. I don't really think this worked super well because it doesn't match on the green robes, which is some feedback I've gotten a few times. But the big thing was I needed to convert the model. As you can kind of see on Dave's box art, she's got this like eye on her crown and on her necklace. And if you're very 40k lore brained, these look like the Eye of Horus. You know, these look very chaos. She she looks like she's got the Sons of Horus logos on her. So I had to shave them off and put something else on her. So on her chest, I cut it off and gave her this symbol of, I think, Order of the Bloody Rose Sisters. Let's get zoomed back in. Sorry about the wobbly camera, everybody. So Order of the Bloody Rose necklace. I shaved off the logo down here on her belt and just tried to freehand in a little fleur-de-lis. Then up on her head, this is the symbol of the ecclesiarchy, I think. And so I just shaved it flat and sanded it back, and then just chopped this. This is actually from the top of a Penitent engine. So they've got like one right above their little heads. And so I chopped that off and shaved it in and put it there. And then obviously in her chest, we got a busted up Akelarre. Instead of this jawbone that you can see in Dave's masterpiece over here. Yeah, shame as well. Maybe, is that good or bad? I don't know. The idea was to try and make the model, I mean, she already looks so much like a Sister of Battle. There wasn't that much I needed to do. The Akelarre I tried to paint, I'm not really sure how well it reads, but the idea was it's a busted relic. You know, we wanted it to all kind of be in theme. The broken sword on the base and the dying Sister of Battle. So we had to have a broken relic. I tried to paint this to look a bit like ivory or like old wood. If you've ever been to a museum and seen like old religious relics, they're always kind of weird bleached bones or carvings or wood. I really wanted it to look like ivory. I don't know if that really came together. I'll try and show you guys a closer up image. Here we go. There we go. So yeah, at least that was the attempt. And then we got some pigment in there, some dust. I think it's a little bit muddled maybe what the material is, but it still looks cool. I definitely was not able to get anywhere near Dave's amazing cloth in this chest. I think this looks like silk, or it looks really beautiful, and I don't think I quite managed to get the silk too good. So Thomas, I'll answer for Seamus. Basically, we are all friends because we're a much smaller country and we don't have a huge painting scene. So, I mean, I've only been in the display painting scene for a year, and there's a lot of people who have been in for a lot longer. Kragzog's similar. He sort of came in a similar time to me. But you kind of get to know everyone pretty quick. Same with Joe. He's in the Australian scene, and maybe some other people in the chat, Sean and JC, if JC's still around. Yeah, you get to know everyone pretty quick. And to be totally honest, I mean, my sense of the European and American painting scenes is that everyone kind of knows each other, because it's not a huge community, so everyone gets to know each other pretty quick. So, back to this. A few things that I would sort of, well, there's plenty you could critique about this. I think, the best angle of this model is probably here, in my opinion. where you get a bit of a look at everything. And I think the composition is nice and it tells the story well, but I do think there's a few people who have told me, like, if I had her on the staircase instead of on a flat platform, because if you look at her flat on, like, you know, things start to get lost quite easily. If she was on a staircase, I might have been able to angle her down a bit more. I didn't really trust my modelling skills to do much more than put her on a pile of rubble and on a flat platform. I've been learning lots of painting skills, but not a lot of modelling skills. And this model that comes in the Sisters of Battle Hospitaller, you know, it has like a underside to it that's on like a little sculpted bit of plastic. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Warhammers, with multiple Warhammer models that have, like, you know, the tactical rock bases and stuff, and like the bottom of her is sculpted into the rocks, and so I had to glue that on and then just kind of cover it with like just rubble and crap, and I wasn't confident in my like ability to try and have this model like on a staircase or anything else that would make her a bit more interesting and make the composition work a bit better, I think. I also think the values are not great. I think if she had more of a spotlight effect on her, I think I probably could have darkened down a lot of the other elements of the base and really brightened the value on the dying sister. Then I think the composition would work a lot more. And that's like a painting thing, right? Like, there's times when you've got a miniature that's been built in a composition that you can't fix, right? But you can use your paint to fix it. And even if I had built it, well, I've built it this way, and I think if I was painting it again, I would try to use my painting to fix the issues with the composition that I couldn't fix with my own modeling skills. But I think hopefully you can see the face as an improvement in comparison to the other faces that I've painted. So let's have a little talk about the face for a bit. So let me just, I think we're a bit overexposed again. Here we go. Maybe that's better. So this is the first miniature I painted after doing my workshop with Jordan with lead white, and I think it's better. I'd like to think that the face is a lot better. It's got a much sharper bit of contrast, you know, in this cheek where the spotlight drops off. I'm really happy with this sort of really warm saturation increase in the jawline that is kind of from the light bouncing off her red robe and then into the underside of her chin. So the idea is to increase the saturation there to make it look a little nicer. I think we've gone too dark now, so I don't know. We'll see how we go. So yeah, I mean, you know, I think, look at these two models. I think there's a nice difference in how well they're painted. Sorry, I'll just move Dave's model off the stream for a little bit. We can all go check it. I'm sure everyone here already follows Dave. He's got a big following and everyone knows his awesome painting. But I mean, if you look at those two, I'd like to think there's a nice improvement in the faces between these. It's kind of hard to see on the camera some of the stuff that I've done, but there's some very bright, like, specular highlights in the nose and under her eyes. I tried to make her look quite flushed, so that she's, you know, she's, I don't know, intensely praying. Her eyelids are very pink, and I've also got a lot of red in the underside of her nose and lip. And I'm really happy. Like, those are the highest color saturation points on the model. I think the painting kind of leads you to her face really nicely when you look at the whole thing. So yeah, I think it was a big improvement in the face. The thing I should also say about this, I painted it in 12 days. I did my workshop with Jordan and I had less than 2 weeks, I think, or about 2 weeks until the guild's in. And I thought, this is the time to do this model. If I don't do it now, it'll never get done. So I absolutely blitzed through this 12 days from construction to painting. I think most days I was painting for 10 hours. And there's a lot of shortcuts I think I took. particularly in some of the non-high focus areas. Like I think down here, you know, I think there's a bits of detail that kind of drop off that aren't quite as nicely done. Maybe the back of the wood as well is pretty basic. You know, you can see like under her hand is barely painted. You know, the base is kind of like just lots of stippling and dry brushing and stuff, just to get it done. But I'm happy to get it finished. Hey Ethan, how you going, man? Thanks for tuning in. Let me turn down this light a tiny bit. There we go. Yeah, so I think it's a great piece. I'm very happy with how it turned out, but I do think there's a lot that could be improved. I feel like I had a good opportunity to implement a lot of what I learned from Jordan, but not everything, because I was in such a rush to finish this model that some of the like, you know, I didn't really have the time to really think about what I was doing with a lot of it. And if you're new to painting display models at all, I feel like a lot of what makes things take a long time is that you have to work out what you're doing half the time. I feel like, you know, we get quite used to painting Warhammer models, 32mm models, and everything becomes kind of second nature. But then when it comes to painting large scale models, it's a whole different bag, and you've got to kind of readjust all your skills and approach things in a new way. And so I didn't really have the time to just chill. All right, so took that to Guilds Inn. One other thing I'll talk about is Thibaut Rahm. He came to Australia to compete in Guilds Inn, and I painted this in a workshop with him. So had a nice chance in a space of about 2 weeks, where I had never done any learning from any other painters, to getting to do 2 workshops with some amazing painters. So from Jordan and from Thibaut, who came to compete in Guilds Inn. And this is, I think, a bust he designed, and he basically just uses it to teach. And so we painted this over there a day. Obviously, as you can tell, it's not finished, but he sort of taught us a lot about non-metallic metal, about painting faces. You know, I think I took a lot of notes in this, and I was actually not doing a whole lot of painting. Most of the time I was just sitting there writing in my book, trying to take notes about what he was trying to teach us. So that was pretty fun. I don't really have a huge amount to say beyond his way of painting metal is very, very interesting. And if you really ever have a chance to do a class from Thibaut, you definitely should, because I think his approach to non-metallics is really, really interesting. It leaves a lot of room for discovery as you're painting, which is fun. You know, getting to discover like how the metals reflections are going to work, and sometimes I can be a bit rigid about how I plan some of these models. So his way of painting metals is really interesting. I feel like I still haven't really had a chance to implement it very well, because I haven't done many models with NMM on them since then. But anyway, so pretty cool. Thibaut's a great painter. So I took these guys to Guilds Inn, all of my newly painted display guys. So at this stage, we're talking from February, I painted Rigel, and then in July, I've painted the Sister Battle. So that's kind of the timeline we're talking about 7 months. I was first time entering Masters, and was lucky enough to get a silver medal in Masters for some combination of one of these 3 models. So at the Guilds Inn, they didn't award medals for individual models. They just said if you got a entry to a silver level, they gave you a silver medal. And then if your entire collection of models was whatever level, bronze, silver, or gold, you would get a medal for your whole collection. I got a single silver medal. So it was basically, speaking to the judges afterwards, it was one of these 3. I think they ended up saying it was for King Arthur. They told me from judges' feedback that the Dwarf was better because he was more coherent, but King Arthur was sort of more of a risk-taken painting. And so they decided to give me the medal, I think, for him, just because it was, even if it didn't, all the decisions didn't quite work out. they thought, hey, taking a risk, we're going to reward the risk taken, I guess, because, I don't know, he's a very atmospheric piece, I guess. And that's how it worked out. All right. So that was Guilds In. So first competition, entering Masters, I did really well. I was very happy. We're not up to the gnome yet, Joe. Come on, we're jumping ahead too much. After that, Guilds In, I was super burnt out. So I decided to paint something I didn't have a lot of attachment to. So I took a few weeks off. I should also mention, after Guilds In, I was lucky enough to be contacted by Verko's Vault about this piece, where they wanted to purchase it for their collection. And that came 2 days after finishing painting this model. I think 3 days after finishing painting it, 2 days after Guilds In. So it's a nice week of good news, where I got my medal at the first Masters competition, and then had some of the team at Verko's Vault reach out to buy this model. And so it felt like I had achieved like a nice milestone with the painting, like, doing well at Masters, having some collectors who wanted to buy the models was very gratifying, I think, because it's a cool story. And so I'm very thankful to Verko's for purchasing this. Very thankful for all the guys in the Sydney Display Painters Guild who are talking shit right now, JC and Tim, for running Guilds In and running the meetings as well, because I definitely wouldn't be anywhere near making the sort of, I don't know, progression in painting if I didn't have the meetings to go to. So a bunch of legends. But anyway, I was burned out as hell after that, because I had just spent 2 weeks painting insanely long days. Yes, as JC is saying, Sunday 23rd of February, if you're in Sydney, get along to the Sydney Display Painters Guild. Check them out on Instagram. Let's bring them up again. Here we go. Where are we? Look at that. They call me the professional streamer. So I was gifted this model, which is called, I think, Celedriel Moon Arrow, from a friend named Oliver. He's a good friend. He was someone who worked with me at Games Workshop and is a champ. Hey, thanks for the subscription, Tim. What a legend. So gifted this model. I decided to paint something I wasn't super attached to because I didn't buy it myself, so I didn't really have any plans for it. So I thought I'll give it a go. Let's zoom in a little bit. Now, I hope the sculptors don't mind me saying, but she has a pretty weird face. And so it was quite hard to paint, but I feel like I was starting to implement some of the ideas I was learning from Jordan, from Thibaut's class, from just practicing more, painting more. You can kind of see here in her lip and nose, I've got a lot of red. This is something I just like. I've started to like to do a lot. Just putting a lot of saturation in points in the face that aren't going to be distracting, but that just kind of lead your eye there. This model is insanely difficult to paint. There's something about the way it's sculpted. It's got these really sharp divots, almost like the sculpt is too sharp in some of the lines. So JC, I don't know when I consider a project finished. I guess when I don't want to paint it anymore. This, as we can tell, is not finished. I tried to paint the start of this, being quite conscious of how Jordan had taught me to sketch. And so that's why I'd kind of tried to sketch around the model quite roughly. So I got all the light and dark in place. The idea is that she's being lit kind of here, sort of thereabouts. But in the end, the model was just too difficult to continue on with. The sculpt is just really tough. I don't know if I'll get back to it. I'm very thankful that Oliver gave me this model. It was great practice, and I'm actually quite happy with how the face turned out, even if it's kind of a weird face, and I don't think I'd ever go back to finishing it. I think it's cool. Like, there's some nice color in there in her cheek, as you can kind of see. I'm quite happy with how the highlights have placed. But I feel like we've got a nice looking little face here, and the rest is kind of not finished at all. But yeah, the model was too tough to paint. There's parts of the sculpt that make it really challenging. I'm really in awe of the guys who have painted this and made it look good, because there's a few really good versions out there of this. But I'm just not someone who can. I ended up having to shave her eyebrows off and her eyelids off so that I could try and paint her eyes and eyebrows, and I still don't think they turned out super, super well. I'll just chat about this for a minute or two more, and then I'm going to take a quick break. Let's go to the toilet again and grab a quick drink, and then I'll be back to talk about my last few models. So yeah, it was fun. I actually quite like the NMM in the crown as well, like in this line and here. Again, I don't know if it's easy to tell. I have on the keyboard behind me. I actually don't know how to play keyboard. This is Claire's keyboard behind me. She's a good at playing the piano. She tried to teach me once, and we had to stop because I was getting too frustrated trying to teach me how to play the scales, and I was no good. But anyway, so yeah, this is a cool model. If you can get it and paint it, then you've got more commitment than me, because I couldn't do it. All right, guys, I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be back in maybe a minute or two. The stream is telling me it has to play an ad. I don't know how all this stuff works. I'm working out Twitch, so I'm going to play an ad for a minute, and I'll be back in like 2 minutes. This is, again, what we call professional level streaming. Alright, so after Guild's in, we've painted ourselves half an elf, which has gone, alright, I guess. But I knew I couldn't finish this model, so I thought, let's move on. I had another academic bust from Hera, which I've helpfully put some modesty blue tack on, because I'm not sure if you're allowed to put a boob on stream. And so let's get this a little closer up. Here we go. Alright, let's focus in. There we are. Maybe a little less bright. Okay, what do we think? Can we see everything okay? Maybe a tiny bit less bright. Alright, there we go. So this is an academic bust from Hera. Same company as the Dwarf academic bust. What do we reckon? Good fit for one another? I really like this model. It's a lovely sculpt. And I thought, here we go. We did our workshop on painting faces with Jordan and with Thibaut. So let's try and paint a face and make it a good face. So the idea with this was that I would have... There's actually some really nice versions of this model out. I think the guy who did the box art is Fer Miniatures on Instagram. I might try and pull up their account real quick. He's done like a bunch of versions of this bust, but he lights it very differently to the way I've lit my version. Let's see if we can bring them up. I think they do quite a few box arts for Hera, and they've done like a billion versions of this model. I think like maybe 3 or 4 now, and I think they use them in a class as well. Here we go. Alright, sorry. Again, what do we got? Professional streaming. Alright, let's go here. There we go. So they've got one where they've got this light coming in from the her right hand side. They've also got this version based on, I think, Princess Mononoke, I guess. This version. So they've obviously painted this a fair few times. Definitely check them out. A great painter. Lots of cool stuff as the miniatures. Okay, let's bring up another version. There we go. Although I don't know if I'm supposed to have nudity or not on this, so I'm going to take it down and just back to this model. Peapot, I use a combination. For the most part, it's just water. I do really like Lamian Medium from Games Workshop. I don't really use anything, any other mediums besides Lamian Medium. But for the most part, I will say it is just water rather than anything else. Yeah. So, on this guy, well, this woman, light coming in from this side here, and then I wanted to have a sort of bounce light coming in from this side. As you can kind of see, it's like a sort of magenta-y kind of tone, coming straight like at her chest. And so I kind of imagined it as like, you know, maybe she's woken up in the morning and she's looking out the window and there's sunlight coming in through the window. And then maybe, I don't know, maybe there's like a light on the inside, or maybe like there's a red painted wall on the side and the light's bouncing in. So I think this is a really nicely painted face. I hope you guys agree. Exactly, morning nip slip. This was the first face that I feel like my learning on faces is really coming into effect. I think she's got a good look to her. Again, I mentioned before, I like to do this really intense red under her nose. Now, for the most part, no one's going to be looking at your model like this, so you don't have to spend a huge amount of time, you know, painting the underside of her chin and stuff like that, because that's just not how we're going to look at these. But something, again, I learned from Jordan, and also just from looking at some of the pros, like Kirill Kaneev, the master, is someone who does this kind of thing a lot, where at certain points of the model, in shadow, he just goes to an intense level of saturation. You know, just pure red. So this is like, I think, Tourmaline red, whatever the red is in the Chimera set that's not the red, the one that was in the expansion pack, I think. I really like that red color. It's really nice. And then this, I've lined her lip just with that red, pure red. No black lining there. It's just that pure red. And so you get this effect. I also kind of glazed it on in her eyes, kind of like, you know, where she might wear eyeshadow. And in the corners near her nose, just here and here. Like, oh, sorry, the brush is not very pointy, just here. And on the other side, just here. And the effect it kind of gives when you see it in person is like, you kind of can't help but stare, like, right into those zones, you know? They just draw your eye really intensely. I'm quite happy with the blue in her eyes as well. Thanks, Batch Painter. Thanks for joining and watching. I'll be trying to stream pretty regularly if I can. People seem to be enjoying it, so I'll definitely try and do it more regularly. Thanks for coming and commenting. So yeah, I didn't finish the model, as you can see. I wanted to get a nice sense of color harmony, so I feel like this is where I've started to be a bit more thoughtful about the models, even though this wasn't finished. It's a pretty, you know, I wouldn't say it's a limited palette model, but it's, you know, there's only really 3 colors, right? There's the skin color, her eye color, and her hair color, and the idea was that this sheet was going to be the same color as her eyes. Oh, I should say, yeah, Thomas, I will stream painting. I thought for a first stream, just to try and get myself used to talking on stream, I would just do a little review of my models, so that I could get used to it and work out the camera and everything. But I will set it up so that I can paint on stream, and I can't remember if I mentioned at the start of the stream, but basically, like, you know, this is painting over the past year has kind of become like my whole life. I'm really quite you know, set on being a good painter, learning as much as I can, you know, going to the shows and competitions and competing. Later this year, I'm going to World Model Expo, which will be the first time I go to an international show in Paris. And I'm going to try to go to Monte San Savino next year if I can. So it's basically like all I do now is just think about painting and try and get better and better and better. So if you're interested in display painting, or really just getting better at painting, hopefully you'll get some value out of the streams. A lot of the time when I'm painting, my painting friends and some of the Sydney guys will tell you, like, I need to talk through a lot of it, just so that it gets out of my mind, where I find it kind of hard to sort of organize my thoughts about painting sometimes. And so talking through, like, I sometimes need to just talk through like ideas I'm having, and so I feel like these streams might be a bit helpful for talking through the process. And I also think, like, you know, with display painting content and streams and stuff out there's a lot of people who talk about the technique and like how to do this. So, you know, if I wanted to say how to paint this skin, I could say, like, these are the colors I used. But there's not a lot of conversation about like why you do those decisions, like what the actual thought process is. And that's the kind of stuff I find really interesting. Like whenever I get a chance to talk to a painter, that's the stuff I like to talk to him about. It's like, why did you use these colors? Why did you compose a scene like this? Why did you compose your colors like this? Why are you trying to use, you know, these tones here? Or what's your thought process behind what you're doing? So hopefully I can delve into that kind of stuff a little more on the stream. I'm definitely keen to do it more. It might take me a little bit of time to fully set up the camera in the position where I'll be able to paint. But I'm in the run-up to World Model Expo now, which is on in July. So I will be painting a lot between now and then to get stuff ready. I've got ARC, which is a competition in Melbourne in Australia, that's coming up soon in a couple of months, and Guilds In. So there's plenty of competitions I'm preparing for. So yeah, if you want to dig into display painting and join me, then, you know, tune in if you want to. So yeah, on this model, one of the things I wanted to try and do was have a nice bit of unified color in the color scheme. The freckles that I've painted on her, I don't know if they're super visible on the camera, but she's got a lot of them in the middle of her chest. They kind of got painted over from where I left it, but the idea is to have her quite freckled on her arms and chest and face, and they're all painted with the same color as her hair, so it ties everything in, I think, pretty nicely. A lot of people have told me I need to finish this model because they think it looks nice. I hope you guys think it looks cool, even at the state that it's in. I definitely think I will at some stage. I hope so, but it's not a huge priority for me. I think I learned a lot painting it, but I'm not, like, you know, dying to try and finish it. So we'll see how we go. So yeah, basically after, like, in that run up, after well, let's zoom out a bit again. After Guilds In, I'd finished my Sister Battle. There we go. Started up 2 models that I didn't finish. These 2. And then I was very burnt out, but I eventually got started on my first Spiro model, the Gnome. I know you're all waiting for it. Hey, Simon. So this is the first model from Lucas Pena, Spiro Mirabilis, that I've painted. I started this in I don't know, September maybe. I basically had you guys will get heaps done. Come on, Tim. You'll get plenty done. Thanks for the subscription, Sean. Legend. So let's have a drink. I started this model after ditching the last 2. I felt like I was on a run of, like, not being able to finish models. Actually, someone else will be able to tell me, but I started also these. I should probably talk about them as well a little bit before diving into the gnome, because I have a ton to say about the gnome. There we go, sneak peek of what I'll talk about in a few minutes. I also made a start on these two. So we've got this Goblin. I think he's got some weird name, but it's from Akelarre Models, which are a Spanish company. I think sculpted by Ivan Marder. Very cool. Very cool model. And then obviously legendary model from legendary sculptor Maxime. I did model tease you. That's how the stream works, guys. We gotta tease the people a little bit, and then we gotta go back and forth. Show the people what they want, but also not too much. So this guy, I started painting with my friend Oliver, the one who gave me the elf model, as a little, try to help him learn some stuff, give me another academic to work on. As you can tell, I like to do these academics, especially when I'm learning stuff. Hey Ivan, how you going? So the Goblin was another one to learn a little bit, and also to help Oliver do a bit of learning. He has this model as well, and we were painting him together. I really like where this is sort of going. He's not finished. Whoops, let's zoom in a little. He's just a weird little guy, isn't he? I'm very happy with his eyes. I think they're quite striking. There's a lot of red around them. So in his eyelids, this sort of black line is actually just painted with pure red again, like in the top eyelid on both of his eyes. So you get a nice, really heavy dose of warm saturation when you look at his eyes. That kind of is just there. You don't notice it super well when you're looking into his eyes, but it just kind of helps draw you to him. And then the yellow, obviously, is, I think, pretty strong. And I also started this Eryet model from Fer Miniatures, sculpted by Maxime Penot. I'm sure everyone knows who that is. Well, I'm sure most of you do. Me and four other guys from Sydney, we had originally planned to paint this model and bring it all to Crimson Brush, and literally not one of us finished it. We all made a start, but none of us finished it. But these are two models again where I feel like, the faces are getting better and better. Hopefully you guys will agree. Let's just up our brightness a tiny bit. Well, maybe that's too much. So I feel like we got our nice golden blonde hair. I feel like, let's have another look at a comparison between a model that was painted earlier in the year. Hopefully we can see a bit of growth in terms of the realism in her hair and the colour, and also the realism in her face. I think she's got quite a good expression, just staring down the barrel. In a lot of ways these are trying to get at similar tones. Well, obviously the tone on Eryet's face much more golden than the pale pink skin. And I mentioned before, talking about Val-K, this is painted to me like someone who's painted a lot of Warhammer models, and to me Eryet hopefully has the kind of stuff in it that you see mostly in display painted models, right? So there's a lot more contrast, there's a lot more nuance in the colour. I painted the freckles. I've got some nice sort of reddishness to the cheeks. I think you can kind of see I've become quite taken with the idea of painting cast shadows. So there's a lot of painters who are really, really good at painting cast shadows. I think someone like Eric Swinson, who's one of the best to do it. Amazing at painting cast shadows. So I've become really interested in doing that. You can see in the gnome, he's got a cast shadow on his big nose. It is indeed, isn't it, Trent? Thanks for watching. So yeah, I tried to do also a nice secondary light. I mean, obviously this model's not finished, so I'll try and hopefully make it look a little better. but I hope you can see like a difference in the faces that we're talking about. But I'm really enjoying the cast shadows. Thanks for subscribing with Prime, Deno. What a champ. Yeah, so, okay, let's talk about the actual gnome. So, one of the things about these, if we have a look at, like, what I've done since Guilds, we've got, like, 1, 2, 3, 4 models, right? Didn't finish any of them. So I was in this, like, funk where I was like, am I ever going to finish painting a model ever again in my entire life? Because I kept picking up projects and then ditching them before they were finished. Noma was the first model I've finished painting since Guilds. I've only finished painting 2 models since then. So you can kind of see we've talked about 10 models or so all day. And every single one except for this one was finished before July. And since July last year, I've painted this model and one other. So it's been, a bit of a stretch a bit of a difficult path to getting back to it, to finishing models. But I think this looks pretty good. So this is something I tried to put a lot into. It was sort of in a slightly tough time. My mum had gotten quite ill, and we were a bit unsure of what was going on, and it made painting quite difficult for the few months that I was working on this. I was working on it from... I finished it in November, and I think I started in early September. I did paint a Warhammer Ork in between. I don't have that with me at the moment, but he was just a gaming model. And so basically the idea with this, I'm sure most of you guys will know the model, sculpted by Spiro Mirabilis, Lucas Pina. A really lovely sculpt, not a traditional, aggressive aggro fantasy model, or like half-naked woman. Just a nice little scene. Thank you, Val Movement 19. I'm glad you like it. So I basically wanted to paint this. It's kind of based on my grandmother. I think her face is weirdly similar to my grandmother's face. I'll bring it up. Here we go. This is her. Unfortunately, she's passed away about 6 years ago now. But they kind of got weirdly similar shapes to their faces. So she reminded me of my grandmother a lot, and I thought I'll give it a go. I'll try and kind of imbue it with some of the skin tones. Jesus, look at the difference in saturation between my camera and this photo. Neither of these are really quite right in terms of what it looks like in real life. It's kind of halfway between these two photos in terms of the actual color. This is way more desaturated than it looks in real life, and the camera is probably bumping the saturation a touch, but the yellow and the blue look pretty accurate to what I'm seeing on my screen, at least. And so a lot of people, I think, would get this model, and they I'd seen a few versions where they've painted this owl with eyes bulging as if she's squishing it way too hard, and maybe she's gonna kill the owl or whatever. And I wanted to make my interpretation as irony free as possible, to just take at face value, this is an owl and a grandma, and they both are very happy and in love with each other, and it's a beautiful pet. I didn't want to have any winking and nudging and comedy in it. I just wanted it to look nice. And so everything was obviously about the expression in the owl's eyes and in Giagia's face. Some go-to tricks that I've been doing. Again, we've got the super saturated red under the nose and in the folds of her eyes and eyelids. Very strong, it's literally just that Chimera warm red from the expansion set straight out of the pot, just painted in some lines. And similar in her mouth. I actually did do it in the crease of her mouth, but it ended up being a bit too much, so I had to tone it down a little bit. I tried to have some similar tones from my grandmother's face, in particular in her cheeks, and the sort of darkness around her nose and in her chin. But I wanted the lighting situation quite different. So it's a cast shadow again. You can kind of see, obviously, the cast shadow from the nose and the side of her face, from the owl's belly onto her apron. But basically, I wanted it to be lit by the sun. So much warmer tone to her face than the photo of her playing her piano accordion in the photo that you can see on my Instagram. She used to play this piano accordion at everyone's birthday, and she never, I don't think she ever really learned how to play it for her entire life. It was always terrible, but it was always enjoyable when she would play it. And so, I tried to put as much real color into her face as I could, and as much sort of nuance into her face as I could. So there's a lot of color. One of the things I like to do is in the cast shadows. I'll see if I can bring it up a little closer so you guys can sort of see. Actually, to be honest, you can see it in the photo as well. You see these lines of like orange here. You can see my mouse, can't you guys? Thanks, John. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Have a good one. So these lines, like where the shadows start and end, when a person, has like our skin's translucent, so when your skin transitions from like light to shadow, especially when the lighting's really harsh, you get like some purplish and reddish tone that like comes through your skin from the light. And so this, like these orange lines where the shadows right on the borderline between the shadow and the light are just a mix of Chimera's warm yellow and tourmaline red, whatever it's called, and to make like this super saturated orange. And I just do like little glazes stippled into those lines. So here, around the border of the cast shadow, in her eyelids, and it kind of like, I don't know if it necessarily makes it look more realistic, but just having the like super saturated colors on the border of the shadows just make the transition to shadow a little more interesting. And sometimes like in skin tones, like when we paint them, sometimes the transitions to shadow just look a little boring and can look a bit funky. And there's also kind of a little way to not have to blend them as much. Like, you kind of use this little burst of color that doesn't necessarily look, blended or whatever, but they look cool. So the shadow on the mouth, is there highlight on it, or is it a solid color? It is not a solid color, but there's not as much work to paint it. So it's kind of hard to see, but it does get darker in the fold here and in the fold of her mouth. And it gets a little bit brighter on the raised spots just here on her mouth and like sort of on the top of her lip and on the bottom of her lip, closer to, where the line between her lips is. I don't think you can just paint it a shadow color flat. I think it would look a bit strange. Maybe you can see it a little better here, actually, when we look on the side. You can kind of see, well, I'll try and get the brush in from a better angle. This sort of volume here of her jowls or whatever, and her cheek, like they're a little brighter, and then it goes a little darker as it goes to a deeper shadow, if that is helpful. So everything was in the expression of the two faces, obviously. I wanted the blue to be like the only really intense spot of saturated color, so that you're looking straight in the two spots, hopefully, when you go to look at the model, and you get to see everything. Obviously there's lots of red in the shadows of her face. It's also quite hard to see, but in the blacks of her eyes there's a glaze of the same tourmaline red, just sort of stippled in. It's easier to see in person, but again, it's just like putting little bits of like those super saturated reds into your darks in some spots on the faces. Is just kind of like, it kind of gets you looking there, but you don't know why. Like, it's a bit hard to explain, but you kind of can't help but look at those spots. and it kind of, I don't know, I find it almost like, it confuses my eyes a bit, but I know I'm looking in the right spot. So yeah, it's a good way to help you draw focus to the right areas. So there's a few things. I got a lot of help on this from my painting friends, from Kyle Morgan and from Jordan and Seamus and Joe, who also copped a whole lot of work in progress photos while I was painting this. There are a few ideas I had originally on this model that never panned out. If you'll so my grandmother is Greek. One of the early ideas I had was to paint like this big hat like it was a Greek pot, in like a terracotta color with like geometric patterns on it, and like I was going to do an olive tree because the area of Greece that my grandmother's from is called Kalamata. They make a lot of olive oil there. And that was just an insanely ridiculous idea. Like, this wouldn't have worked at all. Like, it's a big cone. It wouldn't have worked as like a cylindrical pot. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was dissuaded from that quite early on. My second idea was to paint a lot of freehand on this hat and apron. So I had this sort of pattern mocked up of an olive branch that would wrap around the bottom of her helmet here. A helmet. It's not a helmet, it's a hat. Her nice little cone hat. And should have based her in a pot. Exactly, Seamus. Got the right idea. You don't paint the head like a pot, you put her in a pot. It's much better. I was also going to have this olive branch sort of arcing across the top. I was going to try and have it so that it kind of framed the face. I actually started painting it a couple of times. I also was going to put an olive branch here and maybe have like a little pattern going down on the sides. And in the end, the thing is, this entire piece is just about the two faces. So I kept thinking anything else would just distract. There's other people who are painting this, like Nat Evelina Studios at the moment, who is a judge at Crimson Brush. A fantastic painter and one of the best freehanders to ever do it, is painting her owl with a ton of freehand on it. It looks beautiful, but it's a very different vibe that she's going for with mine. And mine is I was trying to make it a more intimate scene, and the freehand was just distracting. Like, I feel like the way it's set up right now is when you look at it, your eyes just go straight to the two faces, and everything else is just kind of superfluous. But I did want there to be more like painting on the model. So it was sort of like a thought of, how do I do more without doing things that are going to be distracting? So a couple of things. Obviously the feathers, lots of little streaky lines, lots of color in them, and then the knitted jumper. So obviously, if you guys are very familiar with many display painters out there, this is the Mark Masclan's sort of style of cabling in the jumper. He does it a million times better than I ever could. But I really wanted to try hard to put that cabling in the jumper. We've also got a secondary light on the back with some blue, which I'll talk about in a second. But I wanted to do the cabling like Mark does. So we've got the exact same sort of pattern he does. It's probably easier to see here on the back, where it's just the diagonal lines going up and then down, up, down, and you try and get them in nice, neat rows. And sort of here, obviously, it was pretty simple, but I wanted to try and add something more. So I looked at some pictures of these kind of green knitted jumpers, and then I came up with this idea for this, like, you see this little like swirly, twisty pattern on her arm, and then the diamond shapes in the top of her arm. There's a bit of dust in there. And so I thought, okay, I'll do the Masclan style jumper, but I'll try and add a bit more to it. And in the end, I think like you can really see like when it's done from someone who's sort of trying this technique for the first time versus you look at his, and it's just incredible the way he gets it done. It's so neat and straight, and he works out the volumes and value changes so much better than I can. But there are some pieces of it that I really like. I'm quite happy with. I was quite conscious that, she's stretching out, so I wanted the lines, where her arms would be stretching. So I don't know if you guys can see very well, but the lines here are sort of stretched out a bit, and then toward the tips of her sleeves where they would bunch up, they're much smaller. So I did that to try and show, like, the stitches stretching as she would stretch out with her jumper, because it's a loose, like these jumpers would be made of quite loose stitches. And then I obviously wanted to try and texture the hat, so the hat's got quite a fuzzy texture, and then the apron has quite a nice linen texture. And then with the second light, I originally had painted it just as shadow, and I thought it wouldn't really make sense to have a second light. Like, this is supposed to be in sunlight, right? Like, I hope it reads as sunlight. With the shadows, sunlight usually casts quite harsh shadows on you. But, it wouldn't really make sense to have this, like, it's almost like a magical green light coming in the back. So it was just going to be dark. But I thought, like, it doesn't really matter if it makes sense. Like, I mean, this owl has giant cartoon eyes. It doesn't have to make sense. And so the idea was just to have a color shift so that, like, again, it's just a way to try and do more with the model. Like, to do more painting, rather than just to leave the back as sort of undone and something that, is not as interesting. Now, the one thing that, if I were to critique this model much, I think I could have tried to make this color a little bit more harmonious with the light in the front. I think it doesn't, I don't know, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if it does necessarily very much to the atmosphere. Maybe not. I'm happy with how it looks, obviously, but I think this is probably the best model I've ever painted. But I think I'm not sure about this greeny blue light. I don't know. I like it. I'm happy with that. It looks good. I think it looks good, but I don't know if it helped the atmosphere much. I feel like it's almost like we've got our story at the front, and then at the back, it's like I've just tried to do something so that it looks interesting. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think that's just something to bear in mind. Like, if we're trying to do a competition piece where we're really pushing ourselves hard to paint as well as we can, everything should be working towards a story. And I feel like maybe that's a spot that, even though I hope that you think it's painted nice, I don't think it helps the story. Yeah, I mean, Sean, I think you might be right. Like, I don't think it takes anything away, but it's like a piece that maybe could have added something extra. And I think even a thing like this, like, you should always look for something that you can improve on, even on a piece where you're really happy. So after Guilds In, I finished this to enter into the Cult of Paint MPO, Miniature Painting Open Online. And I had basically been painting it for 2 months. I put it away for a while because I just couldn't get it finished. It was hard to do. I just couldn't work it out. And then I came back to it with like 4 days before the MPO and just blitzed it to the end. When the MPO, I was very lucky to get a gold in Masters for this at MPO Online. And I was incredibly surprised for that. I mean, the other 3 Masters golds were painters who I think are so far above my level of painting that it's just a bit ridiculous. But, I was really gratified. They talked about it a bit on stream, and Andy Wardle talked a little bit about what he liked about it, and that was a really big moment for the painting of this. It was quite hard to paint, and it was a very like sort of personal model to do. So yeah, it was very gratifying to get a good result when you put a lot into a model and have it do well and have people like it. So yeah, I'm glad everyone likes the gnome. I certainly like the gnome. All right, and then the last model I'll talk about today is my Vi that I painted for the Crimson Brash. Here we go. Oh, we can get rid of our Noma. So here she is. So this is the first full figure I've painted. This is 1/18 scale, so it's a bit bigger than a 75mm, which is kind of the traditional size for full figures. It's hard to get, I can't quite fit the whole thing in frame because it's big. You can kind of see the scale compared to like a bust. Here we go. So her face isn't that much smaller, but it's got the whole model that I got to paint. So I started this in December, and I painted it through all of December and January for Crimson Brush. It was a bit of a slog. This was a very cursed project in a lot of ways. This model is sculpted by CA3D Studios. There's a sculptor named Sergaz, I think, Serghaz on Instagram. And you can just buy it as an STL. It was printed. This one's printed by Honor Guard on Etsy. There's a few problems with the print. So this came in 2 pieces. She was 1 piece, and the base was 1 piece. Now, can't really tell super easily, but if you look at the original sculpt, I've added quite a bit to this base. When you get the sculpt, she's very hunched over. So this is kind of your dominant viewing angle. She's kind of like this if you square her up when you buy the model. So she's too hunched over, I think. And so what I did was I lifted up the base and kind of tilted it upwards, and then I put some pins in sort of here, and then I had to fill in all the bottom of the base so that there wasn't just a big huge gap. And so I had to extend it out. The real base ends somewhere around here, and then I've added sort of this rock and these rocks, and some of them are hand sculpted and some of them are just like basing rocks or whatever. So yeah, I tried to tilt her up so that when she's like flat on the stand, on the table, or on the bench at a competition, you see more of her face. Because otherwise, she's way too hunched over. You don't get to see her face until you pick the model up. And it also looks unbalanced. Like even here, she still is leaning forward quite a bit. Like, I'm trying to make it square to the camera. She's still leaning forward off these rocks quite a bit. But like if you just used her as she'd come, she'd be like this, like leaning way too far forward. And so the idea was very strong, like central light coming from here. And then we got a secondary light at the back in blue that'll illuminate our like Jinx graffiti and stuff. So 2-tone light source. And still the same sort of cast shadows that I was talking about on the gnome. Dropping down in the nose, cast shadow on, you can see on the arms, on the base as well. I don't know if it's super visible. It's hard to get the shadow of the model, but you can kind of see here we've got the way the fist is sort of casting a shadow and her leg casting the shadow, where the blue light transitions in the front. We've got our sunlight or whatever it is. Yeah. So we'll get a little close-up going. Here we go. So I'm really happy with the way this face is painted as well. I think again you can kind of see like the progression of like the faces I've been painting. We've got the more sort of volumetric lighting coming in like on these models versus if we look back to our original ones again. This is just a very flat looking face compared to like, look at that strong shaft of light in the middle of her face, coming in a straight line down, and then it's kind of reinforced on the top of her chest on this line on her arm. So similar situation to what I mentioned earlier in the stream, where I set this model up with my 2 lights, had the one light coming from here and then the other light coming sort of at the back here. That's blue. And if you get a square on in the eyes, hopefully you can get a bit of the blue rim light coming in on the side and in her hair. I still think the best angle of her when you look at her is front on like this, like a little bit off to the side, so you actually don't see the blue light, and so you gotta kind of turn the model a little bit. But I had actually, when I was painting it, I had planned to make that your dominant viewing angle, but sometimes you got to change things up as you're painting them. And so when I displayed it at the show and took my photos, I sort of put this as your primary photo. Yeah, so we got a little bit of freehand on her neck tattoo. Yeah. And then obviously, as I mentioned, we got some graffiti from Jinx. And under here, Jinx was here. And on the other side, we got a boom. Boom. So the idea was that I had this, like, I had a lot of trouble doing this graffiti because, like, if you look at other people who have painted, like, Jinx or painted our model from Arcane, they really just splash it with graffiti. And I mean, the show does as well, right? Like, whenever Jinx has graffiti stuff, she doesn't just do a few things. But I'm too cowardly. I had to just do small amounts. I wasn't quite able to just send it to giant splashes of color everywhere. But what I tried to do was, when you look at the model as a whole, I tried to have this line that kind of led you to the little Easter eggs, right? So we got the little face, and so then you got the little extra wording under the rock, and then the other lines, we got the little arrow that points you to sort of underneath the rock where you got some extra graffiti. And so what I really tried to do with this model, if you listen to a lot of people talk about display painting, they talk a lot about focus and like leading your eye around the model. And I mean, all artwork is kind of about leading your eye around the artwork, whether it's a sculpture, a regular traditional painting, or a miniature. And so my thinking on this was that we had obviously the strongest light at the top of her face. So that was going to be where all the attention is. And then there's kind of like, we've got a line that points you down. We've also got the red saturation in her hair and in her jumper. Like, you know, warm colors jump out to your eye more than cool colors. So, you know, you're always going to be looking up here, no matter what. Like, it's kind of hard to see the model and not look at the main focal points. But we've got like a line, you know, that's led down with this fist, which kind of just leads your eye around the model. And then again with the gold here on her legs. So hopefully you kind of get a nice little way that your eye will be led around the model. I tried to on the base. I mean, you know, whether this is successful or not, you know, you can tell me. Unfortunately, I can't get the whole, my camera won't zoom out any more than it is, so I can't quite show you the whole thing. But the idea was that I've got these little lines in the rocks that I painted in reds so that they would kind of lead you up the model, so that even if you're looking down in the base, your eye is kind of being led, you know, from the bottom through these lines of reds back to, you know, the points of interest, right? So, you know, her fists and her face. I don't know if that was super successful. That was the intention of painting those spots of red. You know, it wasn't just to put a bit of extra contrast in the rocks, but it was to try and get you looking in the red spots. And so then as we turn the model, you know, hopefully we've got another nice line. So one of the parts of the model that I'm happiest with is this blue glow. I think, you know, we've got a nice transition to shadow, and then the sort of blue LED or whatever from her little power fist. I don't know if these have a special name in the show. I can't remember. And it's kind of, again, it's a line that kind of points you either back to, if you're coming from this direction, it's leading you back to her face, but if you're coming from this direction, it's kind of turning you around the model. And so even from an angle here, like when we have two light sources and there's a terminator between the light sources where there's shadow, usually that can look quite bad. So, because it's just a dark spot. It's like a dark spot between two light sources that kind of looks janky, because whenever you look at things in real life, even if they've got lots of different light sources, like light, you know, it moves as you look at things from different angles. So when we're painting miniatures with lighting, we kind of have to cheat a little bit. But my hope was that, you know, the Terminator line on her face, even though it kind of looks not very good, I don't think, you know, you kind of have something else to look at, right? Which is this nice light on her fist, and you have the graffiti under here, so you can kind of get past a bad angle. Like, every model is going to have bad angles, no matter what. it's just not possible to have every model look perfect from every angle, especially when we're painting lights. And so I hope that the fist is sort of able to get you through the angles that don't look so good until you get to sort of here, where it looks a bit more interesting, right? And you start to see more of the blue light. Sorry, let's zoom out, yeah. Cool. So yeah, this was a bit tough to do as well. I was not really sure how to go about painting the red jacket in blue light, because I think red is one of those colors that, like, if it's being lit properly by blue, it just goes almost completely black. So I had to cheat a little bit again, and I painted this kind of like purpley, dark purple color, and I hope that it comes across as like it's something that's red that's being lit blue, rather than just being entirely blue. One of the things I think people do not quite right with OSL, and like, take any advice I'm giving you with a grain of salt, because I'm still pretty new to all of this anyway. But a lot of people will do OSL and they'll just paint the entire whatever they're painting of the model in the color of the light, and that's not always what happens. You can kind of even see, like here in my face, right? Like, we got warm lighting, and then we've got cool lighting coming from the other side. It's not just making my face entirely blue, it's making it kind of like a color in between my normal skin color and blue. And so the idea was to try and paint this red jacket somewhere between, the blue light and the actual red color of it. And same with the rocks, right? They're a bit more greenish blue, where the pants are neutral color, like they're just sort of khaki stripes, and so they could have a bit more blue coming in them. And then here in the hood, that's already kind of like a dark navy color, so that can be a bit more saturated with the blue. And so yeah, when you're doing your OSL, try and bear that in mind a little bit. Like, again, I don't know if this is a perfect example of it. I'm sure you'll find much better painters do a much better job than I have, but the OSL will tint a color, it will shift to the color along the color wheel in the towards the color of the light. So if it's blue light on a green object, it will make it turquoise. It won't just make it entirely blue. It'll make it like blue green. So you got to bear that in mind a little bit if you want your OSL to look realistic, I think. And so yeah, this is basically the straight on where the light's coming from. We got a cast shadow of the blue light, here on her arm. You can kind of see it. I'm not sure if it's always super successful. It comes in her sleeve as well. One of the things I really like, again, as you're turning the model and we're getting to the Terminator line between the blue light and the light in the front, is there's some really nice, what I think are really nice sort of little spots where you get the blue rim light, like here on her arm. I think this looks quite nice, like where you've got the really golden, like reddish line, and then on her face we got a little bit of blue line on her face. Now from the angles where this model like light lines up, this blue wouldn't be there if you're painting it like entirely realistically, but again, you've got to do some interpretation. Exactly, the warm cool contrast. You got to do some interpretation, I guess, when you're painting your lights. You can't always just keep them 100% realistic. I had a bunch of reference photos, with this model primed with the two different colored lights shining on it, and sometimes you follow it exactly, and sometimes you just got to do some interpretation. And so yeah, these two models were the ones that I painted specifically for Crimson Brush. I was lucky for them to both get gold. This model won Best of Show at Crimson Brush, which was very unexpected. I think it was a very close run thing between this model and the model Liam painted, which was this big World of Warcraft Illidan model, which looked insane. This crazy hand sculpted base. People should definitely check it out. Yeah, that's basically everything I have painted over the past year, I guess. So, I'll bring some up again, just so we can have another look. I hope you can see a little bit of progression here in some of the medals, right? Like our gold, I think this is still a decent start for the gold, but I'd like to think that Vi looks better, and especially her face, I think, looks better. yeah, I don't really have too much more to say. I'll wrap things up in a sec. But just in terms of like, you know, if you're trying to dig into display painting, the idea of talking through these models was just to talk a little bit about the kind of thought that I've tried to put into the models and make them as good as I could make them. And one of the things I sort of expected to be the case, you know, digging into display painting, is that you could just paint them like, you know, I mean, I knew you would have to paint them mechanically different, right? But I wasn't expecting the degree of like planning and sort of thought you had to put into different decisions that you're making in the models. And a lot of the time, decisions that you probably should make before painting them, right? In the planning stages, when you're still working out what you're going to do, what the intention behind the piece is going to be. And so with these two, you know, Vi and the gnome, I'll bring them both on again so we can have a little look at them. You know, these two I don't think are just painted better because I've got a year into an extra year of painting experience, but I spend a lot of time thinking about them, right? I would take a photo after every painting session, and like when I'm not painting, I would look at the photos and try and assess where I'm going to go next. I think things would take me a long time when I'm actually at the painting table, because you're kind of trialing and erroring, you know, your way through, you know, the painting and trying to work out what you're doing. And having the time, just looking at the photos in between sessions really helps you get a grasp on what you're going to do next. You know, you can kind of problem solve a little bit. For me, I still have a lot of problem solving that I try to do because I don't have the experience to work out like, oh, what do I need to do here to make this look good? What do I need to do there to make that look good? Like with this model, all of this, I'll zoom in a little bit. All of this here in her, I don't know, this is a little bit out of focus, sorry. There we go. See all of this like belt stuff where it's got all this texture. I was really unsure how to paint this. Took like maybe 3 or 4 attempts where I just completely started from scratch. Because this sculpt is a little bit anime, it's not super realistic. It's not as stylized as the characters in the show Arcane, right? That this is clearly based off. But it is not as realistic as like a realistic sculpt of a model, right? So it doesn't look anything like Eryet's normal face. She's got quite an anime face. You know, this looks like a airbrushed supermodel or something. You know, like her face textures is very smooth. And so when I was trying to plan how to paint it, I thought I can't do the Arcane painting style because the sculpt doesn't match Arcane. And I can't paint it super realistically because it's not a very realistic looking face. So it has to be somewhere in between. And so, you know, it was a bit of a hard decision to make as to how much texture I would put in the different elements of the model. So the shirt has like no texture. It's basically just block colors. And same with the jumper. It's mostly just block colors. Where the belt and then some of these little leather straps, I tried to put a bit of texture in, and same with the pants as well. So the pants, like the stripes are free-handed and stuff. But on these belts and straps, I just had no idea how to paint them. And I was quite fortunate at the time to be chatting to Dave Colwell, who just sent me a work-in-progress photo of a model he's painting that he hasn't posted online yet. And he had all these crazy straps and pouches and belts and stuff, and he just painted them like this. And I'm like, oh, cool. Well, I've got my idea. I'll just try and rip him off. Which he was, you know, hopefully fine with. I mean, he judged this model and gave it a nice award, so I'm sure he's fine with it. But all these were sort of, I was unsure if this texture would look too much. I hope that, you know, kind of looks okay. But it was definitely tough to work out, you know, how much texture to put in the model. But that is a roadblock on this model that I wouldn't have gotten past in the same amount of time if I just hadn't, by pure coincidence, been talking to a painter who's much more experienced than I am, who had a better idea of how to do these kind of straps on his own model that I was able to sort of get some inspiration from. And so yeah, when you're sort of newer to the display painting, there's a ton of, you know, just kind of problem solving you need to do. You need to think about how you're going to texture the elements, how you're going to paint them, come in with plans, see what they look like on the model. Like some people are really good at visualizing how things are going to look before they're painted, and other people need to have them on the model, and some people are halfway between. I feel like I need to start seeing things on the model before I can assess them. So the belt had to be repainted a bunch of times. The jacket was the same. Like I just couldn't get, I was using a Chimera red, and I just couldn't get it to look good. And in the end, I went back to the old GW, you know, Evil Sun Scarlet and Mephiston Red, and they just worked totally fine, and got me out of a jam. Some Old Faithful paints. Yeah, I'll wrap things up in a minute or two. So just while I'm looking at this, if anyone has a question or two, feel free to ask. And I'll wind things down for the night. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. This has gone a bit longer than I was planning to. I hope you got some value out of having a look at these models. Basically, as I've mentioned earlier in the stream, I'm going to try and do this a bit more regularly. I will paint instead of just talking about models that are already painted. I'm sort of on a quest to get as good as I can at this stuff. It's become a big part of my life. So I try to spend a lot of time thinking about painting and thinking about what to do next, and like I said, working out problems in the models. The base, I think you can see maybe could be a bit better. I was looking at a lot of Albert Font's rocks. You know, there's a piece he did for World Model Expo in 2022, which has some absolutely glorious green rocks. I don't think these are anything like as good as his ones are, but I think they still look pretty good. I'll post the VODs on YouTube. I mean, just if you feel like it, you can follow me on Instagram. You know, I'm just Alexi K Paints on Instagram. I will at some stage put some VODs on YouTube, hopefully soon. And I will then you'll be able to watch it if you want to watch it. And next stream I will do hopefully soon. This coming week. So today's Sunday, isn't it? So I'll definitely do another stream coming up this week. Let's just have a little look here. Where are we? All right. Sorry, this is the most interesting part of the stream, isn't it, everyone? Where I try and work out what the hell I'm doing. So yeah, if you want to learn a little more about display painting or dig a bit more into it, I'm still trying to dig into it and learn everything I can. So, you know, hopefully you'll find some value in watching the stream in future. Yeah, that's about it, guys. I think we're calling it here. If I work out how to end the stream. I don't even know how to end the stream. I think I just close it.